Jack Bruce was more than a bassist. He was a restless creative force who reshaped the possibilities of rock music with his voice, vision, and virtuosity.
No one was young or gay enough. They had it sold out today.
He was a composer of intricate, beautiful, and powerful songs that became anthems for a generation.
There are some rock performers, however, who did have a severe classical training, which they ultimately found to be stifling and destructive. The only way to express what they wanted in musical terms was to escape into pop music. Such a person is Jack Bruce.
From the tenement blocks of post-war Glasgow to the world's grandest stages, this is the story of John Simon Asher Bruce, a man who lived and breathed music until his final day. John Simon Asher Bruce was born in Bishopbriggs, a town just outside Glasgow, on the 14th of May 1943. The Second World War was still raging, and his parents, Charlie and Betty, were travelling musicians, moving wherever work took them. They were communists, politically active people who instilled in their son a fierce sense of social justice and the questioning nature. The family was often on the move, and by the time Jack was a teenager, he had attended 9 different schools. This itinerant childhood fostered a sense of independence and perhaps a degree of detachment. Music was the one constant. It was the family trade, the air he breathed. His parents sang and played, filling their home with sound. Jack showed prodigious talent early on. He won a scholarship to the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama to study the cello and composition. He was a natural, excelling in the structured world of classical music. He loved Bach above all. The mathematical precision and the profound emotional depth of the Baroque master's work resonated with him. He would later reflect on this, saying, "Bach is the ultimate, the be-all and end-all of music. It's got everything. It's got the funk, it's got the jazz, it's got the classical, the pure music." But another sound was calling to him, a sound filtering across the Atlantic, American jazz. He was captivated by the improvisational freedom of players like Charles Mingus and the cool modernism of Miles Davis. For a young man in grey, post-war Scotland, it was a sound of exhilarating possibility. The new love created a conflict with the rigid traditionalism of the academy. The official reason for his departure was a dispute over playing paid gigs outside of his studies. But for Bruce, the philosophical conflict was clear. He later summed it up in his own way. "I got thrown out of college for playing jazz. They said it was the devil's music." He put the cello aside, picked up the double bass, and set his sights on the burgeoning jazz clubs. Though he put it aside during his early jazz years, the cello remained part of his musical palette, resurfacing in later solo work. His early forays were in Scotland and then, briefly, in Italy. He was learning his craft, playing in dance bands and jazz combos. But the real centre of the musical universe in Britain was London. It was a magnet for any ambitious young musician, a city humming with new energy and new sounds. With little more than his bass and a powerful sense of self-belief, Jack Bruce headed south, ready for whatever the capital had to throw at him. London in the early 1960s was a city shedding its black and white past. A cultural explosion was underway, and at its heart was a fervent rediscovery of American blues and R&B. Young musicians were devouring imported records, learning the licks of Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, and creating their own, uniquely British interpretation. Jack Bruce arrived in this febrile atmosphere in 1962 and quickly found his place. He was an astonishingly gifted bassist, technically far superior to most of his peers. His classical training and his love of jazz gave him a harmonic and rhythmic sophistication that was rare in the burgeoning blues scene. He auditioned for Alexis Korner's Blues Incorporated, the seminal band that acted as a finishing school for a generation of British rock royalty. Korner hired him on the spot. It was in Blues Incorporated that Bruce first encountered a drummer named Ginger Baker. Their musical relationship was immediate, powerful, and deeply volatile. They locked in rhythmically, pushing each other to new levels of intensity, but their personalities clashed from the very beginning. Baker, a fiery, confrontational character, and Bruce, a stubborn, intellectually proud Scot, were like oil and water. After a spell with Corner, Bruce, along with Baker, joined the Graham Bond organisation. Led by the larger-than-life Graham Bond, a formidable organist and saxophonist, this band was a fearsome proposition. They fused blues, jazz, and R&B into a high-octane improvisational storm. Bruce began to come into his own, not just as a bassist, but as a vocalist and a writer. He also started playing the harmonica. The Graham Bond organisation was a critical success and a huge influence on other musicians, but commercial success eluded them. The internal dynamics were fraught with tension. Much of it centred on a tempestuous relationship between Bruce and Baker. Their arguments were stuff of legend. On-stage fights were not uncommon.
Jack and I had several altercations during the Graham Bond days. I went, I really don't know, but you're right, he's a fucking good bass player. And so I said, I don't know, I'll go and see him.
Baker once attacked Bruce with a cymbal stand. Bruce, in turn, was not one to back down. He later said of their relationship, "It was a love-hate thing. We were just two very, very different people who had this chemistry. The music they made together was thrilling, but the personal cost was high." After leaving Graham Bond, Bruce had a brief stint with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, a band that had just recruited a prodigious young guitarist named Eric Clapton. Bruce's time with Mayall was short, but it was significant. It put him in the same orbit as Clapton, a musician who, like Bruce, was looking for a new way to play blues-based music. He followed this with a brief lucrative stint with Manfred Mann, scoring a #1 hit with Pretty Flamingo. La, 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 la. Pretty Flamingo. Someday I'll make her mine. For the first time, he was earning good money. It was the first time I'd ever seen £1,000 in one place, he remembered, but pop stardom felt restrictive. He yearned for the improvisational freedom and artistic challenge he had experienced with Bond. The seeds of a new idea were being sown. The idea for Cream came from Eric Clapton. He was hailed as a guitar hero, a god to his fans, but he felt constrained by the traditional blues format of the Blues Breakers. He had been stunned by the musical fireworks he had witnessed at shows by the Graham Bond organisation, particularly the explosive interplay between Bruce and Baker. He wanted to create a band that could take that level of improvisation and power and apply it to a rock context. Clapton's first choice for a rhythm section was Jack Bruce.
Eric said, what about a bass player? And I said, He said, what about Jack? And I went, oh, you know. But I had to admit that Jack was the bass player.
The problem was Ginger Baker. Bruce was adamant that he would not play with the drummer again. Baker, for his part, felt the same way. Legend has it that Clapton had to act as a peacemaker, persuading both men to put their animosity aside for the sake of the music.
And I thought, well, what is this? There's something going back here that I'm not aware of. You know, you've done it again, implied that this was a pattern or something that existed before I knew either of them. And it got a bit heated, but I think it calmed down soon enough, you know, and we then moved to a sort of school. I'm not actually sure what it was. It seemed to, my recollection was that it was in a school or something where we started proper rehearsals in a hall.
In mid-1966, the three of them finally got together in a room to play. The chemistry was undeniable.
It was pretty instantaneous. There was something there, you know, just a combination of, Ginger and myself, I'd played a lot over the years before, you know, jazz things, Alexis and Graham.
Bruce described the moment. When we first played, it was a revelation. It was just one of those things that happens once in a lifetime. There was an immediate connection. They called themselves Cream, a name suggested by Clapton to reflect that they were the cream of the crop of British musicians. From the onset, it was clear that this was not going to be a standard rock band with a lead guitarist and a backing rhythm section. It was a trio of virtuosos, each one a lead player on their instrument, and at the forefront was Jack Bruce. While Clapton was the band's public face, Bruce was its musical heart. He was the primary vocalist, his powerful, operatic tenor soaring over the band's thunderous sound. And he was the principal composer. He renewed a partnership with the poet and lyricist Pete Brown, whom he had met a few years earlier. Brown would hand Bruce pages of surreal, evocative, and sometimes dark poetry, and Bruce would set them to music. Their collaboration was responsible for the majority of Cream's most famous songs.
We did fairly consciously try to write things that weren't just throwaways. We tried, well, unconsciously tried to write things that were conscious, things that would live on, we hoped, because we were interested in posterity.
Songs like I Feel Free, with its soaring vocal melody, and Strange Brew, built around a blues riff Clapton had been playing, showcased their unique sound. But it was their second album, Disraeli Gears, released in November 1967, that cemented their legend. Recorded in New York with producer Felix Pappalardi, the album was a masterpiece of psychedelic rock. It contained the iconic Sunshine of Your Love, a song built around the distinctive bass riff Bruce had written after seeing a Jimi Hendrix concert. Bruce recalled the moment of inspiration. I came up with the riff. It was a sort of reaction to Jimmy. It was a call and response.
I got to know Jimmy very well, and we became very close friends. Jimmy, on a TV show once, stopped and went into playing Sunshine. You know, like, he really dug Cream.
Hendrix and us basically had created this very large audience of people who were turned on to instrumental, vocal, loud, whatever you want to call it, music, rock and roll, I guess, blues with blues in it.
The album also featured the haunting tales of brave Ulysses and the powerful SWLABR, an acronym for She Walks Like a Bearded Rainbow.
You got that rainbow feel, but the rainbow has a beard.
Cream's reputation, however, was built on their live performances. Their concerts were legendary. Extended improvisational workouts where a 3-minute pop song could be stretched into a 20-minute epic. The volume was immense, the intensity overwhelming. Bruce's bass playing was a revelation. He didn't just hold down the rhythm, he played counter melodies. He soloed like a lead guitarist, and he used distortion and feedback to create a sound that was entirely new. The band's third album, Wheels of Fire, released in 1968, was a sprawling double album, 1 disc of studio recordings and 1 of live performances from the Winterland Ballroom in San Francisco. The studio disc contained White Room, another classic Bruce Brown composition. With its dramatic, descending chord progression and apocalyptic lyrics, it became one of their signature songs. By the very things that made Cream great were also tearing them apart. The intense musical rivalry, especially between Bruce and Baker, escalated. The volume of their performances was partly a result of what Bruce called a volume war. He said, "If I was standing in front of my amps, I couldn't hear what Ginger was playing. If he was standing in front of his, he couldn't hear what I was playing. So we just got louder and louder." The musical communication had broken down, replaced by competitive soloing. In late 1968, Cream announced they were splitting up. They performed a farewell tour, culminating in 2 final concerts at the Royal Albert Hall in London on the 26th of November.
I think it was in Texas on the big tour, the 68 tour, where Eric just said, "Man, I've had enough." And I said, "Yeah, man, so have I." And that was it, the end of the gig.
We did what we set out to do, and I think we couldn't have done any more. I think it lasted just the right length of time to make the little statement that we had. I never thought that I would be in a commercially successful band. I didn't set out to do that. In my life, it just happened that way. I'm very glad that it did, though. It was a great experience.
The date is November the 26th, 1968. A British rock group called simply Cream are making their farewell appearance at one of London's greatest concert houses, the Royal Albert Hall.
The band that had burned so brightly had extinguished itself. Even after the split, they released one final album, Goodbye, in early 1969. A mix of live tracks and new studio recordings, it notably included Badge, a song co-written by Clapton and George Harrison, which became one of the band's most enduring singles.
Thinking that I might have drove you too far.
Leaving Cream could have been a daunting prospect. The band had been a global phenomenon, but for Jack Bruce, it was a liberation. He was finally free from the internal conflicts and the commercial pressures of the supergroup. He could now pursue his own eclectic musical vision without compromise. Almost immediately, he began work on his first solo album, Songs for a Tailor. Released in 1969, it remains one of his most celebrated works. He once again collaborated with lyricist Pete Brown, and the album was a rich and diverse collection of songs that drew on jazz, folk, and classical influences, all underpinned by his unique rock sensibility. He said of the album, "I wanted to make a record that sounded like nothing else, and I think I achieved that." He followed it with Harmony Row in 1971, a more introspective and musically ambitious album that Bruce himself often described as his personal favourite among his solo work. His solo career would be characterised by this restless creativity. He refused to be pigeonholed. He formed a new power trio, West, Bruce, and Lang, with guitarist Leslie West and drummer Corky Lang from the American band Mountain. This was a much heavier, more blues rock oriented outfit, and they enjoyed considerable success. But he also delved deeper into his love for jazz, forming various ensembles under the name Jack Bruce and Friends, which featured legendary musicians like jazz fusion guitarist Larry Coryell, drummer Billy Cobham, and keyboardist Carla Bley.
I see lovers among the trees, wondering if you are there.
Throughout the 1970s and 80s, he released a string of solo albums, each one different from the last. The refusal to follow a commercial formula meant that he never again achieved the stratospheric level of fame he had with Cream, but he earned the profound respect of his fellow musicians. He was seen as an artist of immense integrity. He also struggled with personal demons. For many years, he battled a serious addiction to heroin. It was a dark period that took a heavy toll on his health and his finances. He spoke about it with unflinching honesty in later years. "It was a very stupid thing to do. It took me a long time to get over it, but I did. I was one of the lucky ones." Despite these challenges, the music never stopped. Jack Bruce was a complex man. To the outside world, he could appear difficult, stubborn, and fiercely intellectual. He did not suffer fools gladly and had a reputation for being uncompromising. But there was another side to him. He possessed a wicked sense of humour, a dry, Glaswegian wit that could cut through any pretension.
It sort of fell apart, to be quite honest about it. I mean, I think we did quite well to make it last as long as it did.
His approach to his instrument was revolutionary. Before Jack Bruce, the bass guitar in rock was largely a supportive instrument. Bruce turned it into a lead voice. He played Gibson EB3, a short-scale bass that he pushed to its limits, creating a thick, distorted, and wonderfully expressive tone. He famously said, "The bass is the most important instrument in any band. It's the link between the rhythm and the harmony. It's the foundation." His voice was just as remarkable. It was a high, clear, and powerful tenor that could handle the most demanding melodies. He was, in essence, a rock and roll leader singer, bringing the emotional range and narrative depth of German art songs to the world of blues and psychedelic rock.
No one was young or gay enough. They had it sold out today.
His relationship with Ginger Baker remained a defining one throughout his life. Despite their legendary battles, there was a deep, if often unacknowledged, musical respect. Bruce once admitted, "He's a great musician. I don't think I've ever played with a better drummer, but he's a horrible person." The creative spark they ignited was unique. It was born of conflict, a musical argument that produced something extraordinary. He was proud of what Cream achieved, but had no desire to live in the past. His influence was immeasurable. Virtually every rock bassist who came after him owes him a debt. He was a true original, a singular voice in music who refused to play by anyone else's rules. The later years of Jack Bruce's life were marked by both renewed creativity and significant health challenges. In 2003, he was diagnosed with liver cancer. He underwent a liver transplant, but his body then rejected the new organ, and he was left critically ill. His resilience was extraordinary. He fought his way back to health and back to music. In May 2005, Cream reformed for a series of concerts at the Royal Albert Hall. The shows sold out instantly. The animosity between the three members seemed to have softened with time. The performances were powerful and emotional, a dignified final statement for one of rock's greatest bands. That same year, his influence was formally recognized when he was presented with the International Bassist Award at a tribute concert in Germany, a rare public acknowledgement of the quiet revolution he had started decades earlier. Following the reunion, Bruce continued with his solo career. His health remained a concern, but his desire to create and perform was undiminished. In March 2014, he released what would be his final studio album, Silver Rails. Recorded at Abbey Road Studios, it was a powerful and poignant collection of songs, a lasting reflection of his enduring talent. The album was a collaborative triumph, featuring contributions from his longtime lyricist Pete Brown, as well as musicians like Phil Manzanera, Robin Trower, and Uli John Roth. Just a few months later, on the 25th of October 2014, Jack Bruce died at his home in Suffolk, surrounded by his family. The cause of death was liver disease. He was 71 years old.
A familiar voice. He was a classic rock icon. Jack Bruce from the 1960s supergroup Cream died today at the age of 71. Bruce had a long and varied career spanning 6 decades.
Tributes poured in from around the world. Eric Clapton called him a great musician and composer, and a tremendous inspiration to me. Ginger Baker, in a rare moment of unguarded affection, said simply, "I am very sad to learn of the loss of a fine man." His family released a statement saying, "The world of music will be a poorer place without him, but he lives on in his music and forever in our hearts."